on Ukraine that we want to get to. Elon Musk with some breaking news this afternoon, announcing that his company SpaceX is going to limit the use of the Starlink system in Ukraine. Of course, this was one of the early things in the war after February of last year that everyone was sort of like praising Elon for sending Starlink so people could have internet access.
Right. It's satellite based, so it's, available to anyone underneath the atmosphere.
You just put up a satellite dish on your house, and people that live in rural places can get internet access. The idea was to bring internet to the world.
And so, a lot of the narrative around rolling this out was about the urban disruption, about people who needed to leave their homes, keep in touch with their family, about how, oh my gosh, Ukraine has been sort of bobbled up from the middle. People don't even know where to go. They don't know where their relatives are, who's being called up. And so it was for people, mostly for families. But what they're saying now is they never meant for it to be weaponized. And they know that Ukraine has been using it on the offensive. They don't specifically say what type of offensive moves that they find offensive, pun intended, but they're saying that they know that it's used for attack drones. They know it's used for surveillance, and they just never meant for that to happen. And so they're pulling it.
Well, and if you see these drones that we just featured in that last story with Scott Ritter, where we talked about the chemical weapons use, and you see that these drones are dropping canisters of some sort of chemical weapon, and then to know that, wait a second, the drones that they're using are using the internet, and they might be using our Starlink system to carry out war crimes. I think that's when we shut down the internet service.
Yeah, you got to find a different.
You're going to have to find a different provider for that. Like you want to, get on the phone with one of these other internet telecoms.
Verizon.
Maybe Ukraine can get on the phone with like Vodafone or any of these other different providers throughout Europe and be like, hey, we wanted to carry out some war crimes. We're launching chemical weapons, which we know is a violation of the Geneva Convention of War Crimes. Starlink shut us down. Would you guys throw in some pro bono internet access so we can carry out drone strikes and kill people?
We can have no latency, right, because otherwise we bomb unintentional places, which has happened.
Which we like doing anyway, but collateral damage. So SpaceX, according to these reports this afternoon, has reduced the Ukrainian military's ability to use Starlink satellite internet service to control drones in its conflict with Russia, the company's president said. SpaceX was, quote, really pleased to be able to provide Ukraine connectivity, but the technology was never intended to be weaponized. And they told the 25th annual FAA commercial space teletransportation. So the Ukrainians have leveraged Starlink in ways that were unintentional and not part of any agreement. So, we have to work on that with Starlink. So they have limited their ability to do that, to be able to use Starlink for UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and other things.
Now, they had donated over $80 million worth of Starlink terminals to Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict. When Elon Musk late last year in 2022 mentioned, this is getting a little expensive. No one's even trying to end the conflict. Am I expected to keep footing the bill here? There was a resounding answer on Twitter. Yes, you are. We do expect you to keep doing that. The woke mob just attacked him. And then he further offered a solution to peace talks. They shut that down immediately.
They mocked him for mentioning peace, yeah.
Yeah. So he capitulated, continued to provide this internet access. But now, as Scott Ritter just mentioned, that silence is, what was the word he used? Being complicit.
Yeah.
And clearly they don't want this. Now, they stopped short of saying exactly what they find to be the line in the sand, but they just said there are things that we can do, and we have done, meaning pulling some wires.
Well, you got to wonder what they're aware of too. They're using these satellites, and how much is then Starlink aware that, it seems like NATO is providing targeting information to the Ukrainians using our own satellites, and they're zeroing in on Russian soldier positions, and then they're dropping these chemical weapons on top of them.
Exactly. If NATO's going to be complicit, that doesn't mean Elon Musk and his company has to be, because that's exactly how they're dropping the chemical weapons, is with drones, and they're using that satellite to fly those drones. So in essence, he then would be responsible for the chemicals that are being dropped.
Yeah, because I mean, like, look, if I have an an amateur drone, I've got a DJI, whatever it's called, and it uses satellite. DJI, yeah, sorry, it uses satellite connectivity, and it also tells you when there's like you're in airspace that you shouldn't be, right? Like when I'm flying it over Area 51, like I get an alert, like Clayton, you better turn around and get back out of there. No, when you're flying it near spaces that are restricted airspace, it'll tell you, and you'll get like alerts, and it'll stop you. Like you can't go any further.
Yeah,
so
Clayton has tried.
I've tried, and so it'll definitely be using satellite tracking to let me know where this drone is. So that's I didn't really think about it that
Beyond
way, but that's
just
true.
that, though.
It's interesting. Oh.
Yeah,
ahead,
go.
Philip.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, go. Oh, I was gonna say it's interesting that this story on Reddit. It's on the front page of Reddit, like one of the popular stories for the day. Very pro-Ukrainian subreddit was calling this out, saying that the problem with weaponizing is that they're not weaponizing it because they're using it for defense. So all of this stuff, these drones and stuff they're using, it can't be considered a weapon because they're using it for defense. And it was just a really interesting argument that exactly that was.
So you can use
it. It was like
you can use it for war crimes.
Yeah, you can't use if I use a gun to defend myself, not a weapon. Interesting.